morning. Welcome to the Women in Aviation Mile High Chapter event for July. We're very excited with our guest today being here, and I'd like to introduce you to our Vice President, Miss Sarah Saller, who is going to lead this event. And I want to thank everybody for coming in today, and appreciate all of you joining in and taking the time to be with us today. Sarah, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Women in Aviation Mile High Chapter's July meeting. We have Captain Tammie Shults with us today, and we're going to be answering a few questions regarding current events and her history today. So to begin, we want to discuss the importance of mental wellness and what would you say is the importance of strong mental wellness in enduring adversity and facing emergency situations?
You know, I think mental wellness is, you can look at it just like you would look at physical wellness. And I have to use just a quick example. In college, I ran track and threw javelin, and I remember one spring morning, the Girl Scout cookies got delivered. And freshman in college, it was my first time to have a box of Girl Scout cookies all my own. And I could eat them whenever I wanted to. And bottom line is, I wound up eating a full box of Thin Mints before I went to track practice. And you can imagine that track practice didn't go well. And all of my team got to see my Thin Mints in a not very pleasant way because they didn't stay down. And I think about our mental wellness. I find it in myself. If I'm reading something or I get, hooked on some TV program or something that you think, oh, this is good. And then it starts getting a little dark and a little more complex and a little more depressing. And pretty soon you realize, wait a minute, I'm depressed about life and I don't have a reason to be. So time is influence, and what we feed our minds is what they'll produce. And it's not something that you figure it out as a child or a teenager or a young adult, and then it's done and you're on your way. It's just something that we have to constantly groom what we feed our minds. So mental health is foundational. It's I feel like it's one of those differences between jumping off of a dock or jumping off of an inner tube that's already in the water. Your trajectory and your distance will be completely different depending on the foundation that you launch from. And I often say when I speak, everything that flies launches from a foundation, whether it's rockets from a launch pad, aircraft from a runway, or birds from a branch. And mental health and what we give, time gives influence, and that's what feeds our mind. So that is foundational on every day, and it gets the dross burned off of it on an emergency day. So I think adrenaline in an emergency situation is kind of a God-given drug for us because we need it. We need to think in a rapid fire speed often, but that only gives us acceleration. It doesn't give us an epiphany of any kind. So whatever you've taken time to feed your mind and digest and pour into yourself, what you read, what you watch, your conversations, all those things are part of what you have to draw from.
I love those answers, and it's definitely speaks to how we can handle emergency events today. And regarding COVID-19, how often are you flying?
Actually, Southwest has kept a pretty steady schedule. Now, I just finished my vacation, so I haven't flown a Southwest jet in a few weeks. But before that, I had 3 trips, 9 days worth of flying in the month before. And this coming month, which I will have to say, you're the first to know, is my last month. I'm retiring at the end of August. And I have a full schedule. Now, the days aren't as packed as they usually are at Southwest. We usually have a pretty full day, 10, 12-hour hours worth of flying with very little time on the ground. And these days are a little shorter because of COVID. And so they won't be as packed with flying, but still
Well,
enjoying it.
congratulations. That's
Oh,
amazing.
thanks. Well, I'm excited about getting started on some new adventures and bucket list that has been building up. So,
Well, excellent. What are your thoughts on recent and future industry outlooks for aviation, both for starting off pilots and for veteran pilots such as yourself?
you know, isn't it interesting how it can change overnight? Usually, aviation has a cyclical demand and supply, and COVID has changed the landscape. I mean, before COVID came along, I was so excited to tell the youth and everyone that there's just never been a greater need for pilots. So if you have any interest in it, this is the time to try it. This is the time to do it. And I would have to say it's only shifted. It hasn't, the need for pilots hasn't finished. There are fields such as military. There's National Guard, there's Reserve, there's active military. And then there's the mission field. There's some incredible bush flying to be done all over the world. There's flying over forest fires, something that I did in between the Navy and commercial flying. So it has shifted. I just spoke with a young lady, Megan Foster, and she shifted. She was going to be active duty military, and things just didn't line up, and timing and things. She was doing some nonprofit work, and so then her opportunity went by. She got back on looking into what she could do to get into a cockpit. Commercial aviation, it's expensive to do it all on your own. So she was looking into it and wound up getting hired by a C-17 unit there in McCord, Washington. And so she's headed to officer candidate school. I may have the wrong term for it now, but she'll go through military training, come back and get trained and be flying C-17. So there are some exciting cockpits still open. It's just we have to shift right now. Commercial aviation has slowed down quite a bit because there's just not people moving around the country.
That's very good points, and we've heard from multiple sources basically the same thing that you've just spoken to. How do you keep yourself positive in these challenging times, unexpected times?
You know, I'll give you just step by step for myself rather than a theory, because theories sometimes are hard to grasp a hold of. And so I will just tell you, I really do have kind of a one-on-one counseling session every morning with the God who made me. And I grab a thermos of tea, feed the dog, feed the birds, grab my cup and my Bible, and usually my journal, and I head out to the well house. If I'm not home, if I'm flying, then I have stuff kind of set up the night before so I can just turn on the water and get a cup of tea and sit down at the desk in my room. And just spend some time. I usually start in Psalms or Proverbs in the mornings, and truly I love to be outside just because there is something wonderfully cathartic about the outdoors. That's one of the reasons, Christian or non-Christian, it's something that is promoted to people that are going through depression, is just get outside and get some fresh air and sunshine. And so I would have to say the launch of my day is important to me. Also, what I eat. I have a couple of, they're minor, but they're food allergies that if I decide, no, I want what I want when I want it, I pay for it. And so sugar can just make me so grouchy, and things like that. So kind of paying attention to what does your body, what does your mind need? And then be faithful to feed it properly. Just like the jet fuel that you put it, or the 100 low lead, you know, you get those switched up, you could have trouble. You have to know what you should feed your mind and body to get it started and going.
Health and wellness is definitely important, and you were a naval aviator for many years. How did you incorporate that in your initial training?
Well, one of the things that started even in boot camp was this dogma of attention to detail. It was a quote that all of us, if we could have been able to roll our eyes, we would have started rolling our eyes. But it's true. If you take any aviation mishap and you go backwards, you'll see that there's these tendrils of little things that got missed here or there. It's never just one thing. And so attention to detail. And then in naval aviation, there's a saying, instead of, you set this much power to go this fast, you raise your nose this amount. There's certainly guidelines, but the bottom line is whatever it takes. And they do have a philosophy of use your mind. There's a small book of what you can't do, and if it's not in there, you can do it. And so it makes you be a bit creative. And one of the biggest things, I'd say 2 huge lessons that I came away from the Navy with. One was flying, and one was just a life lesson. The flying, and they both came from the same situation, which I think is kind of interesting. And it was in the humble T2, where I taught for a couple of years before I went on to fly A7s and F-18s. And I was in the lineup. I was now a senior instructor in the lineup to teach gunnery, which everybody dreamed of teaching, because once you got into that, that's all you flew. You flew that twice a day, and it was dynamic and fun. And we had a change of command. And the new commander that came on board was not happy to have inherited a female instructor. And he made it known very publicly, and he had me pulled from being a guns instructor. I was in the lineup to start my flights. I'd done all my tests and things like that. And he said, I will not have a woman teaching guns in my squadron. And so I was sent to teach out of control flight for a year. And it was what no one wanted to fly, even their one required flight of. But I taught it every day, and you take the student up, depart the aircraft in fairly dynamic ways. It starts with a stall, not a big deal, but then it goes on into rudder triplets and things where you just go straight up till you go 0 airspeed. On a good day, you could light a fire, and your exhaust would light your engine would light your exhaust as you slid backwards, and then flop around, and the student would recover. I usually became familiar with what they had for breakfast or lunch. And then that evening, I would kind of get my equilibrium settled down, and then I'd do it again the next day. So it wasn't a coveted decision, but I certainly got used to aircraft being out of control and then brought back into control. Flopping around backwards, sideways, lateral G, positive G, negative G, all those things I got to feel. They weren't all pleasant, but I realized, you know what? They're transitory. They're not forever. It's not the new normal. And then the life lesson was never let an offense get in the way of an opportunity. I think sometimes when we are singled out or feel offended or get fired or whatever the situation, it's really easy to feel like you're the only one in the world that this has happened to. We all face those things.
I love those points. And actually, speaking of your military training, what were a few takeaways that you would pass on to civilian and general aviation pilots? And further, what are the key specific differences between military training and general aviation training that you've observed both in professional flying and just general flying?
Well, it's kind of hard sometimes to speak to what I haven't done. So I could tell you everything about military flying that I've done. But having a son that has come through the GA side of the house so far, he's in college. So he got his private, and then he got his glider, and his next step, if he has time to do it, will be his instrument. And so from the military side of the house, I encourage him when he has a chance. I want him to do aerobatics. I think everybody could benefit from that. And there was a point in time where commercial aviation realized, you know what, if you come up through the GA ranks, you may not have gone upside down, stalled completely, gone in a spin without an instructor. And when you become the captain of an aircraft, you'll need that confidence to get out of that. So they started bringing those in to our training. We would do aileron rolls in the simulator, and we do unusual attitudes, of course, every year. But so from the side of the house, from the military to GA, I would say I would encourage more aerobatic and taking control of an aircraft that isn't behaving well. And then from the GA side to the military, there's lessons to learn there too. I've flown with some incredibly wise GA pilots as my captains whenever I began at Southwest. And also I have some great first officers that are pure GA line, and watching my son as he learns. And I love how comfortable they feel in the different venues. In military, you know, we kind of operate in our own little world. Flying international, it's a canned flight plan and weather. And quite frankly, flying A7s and F-18s, I'm usually following a tanker. So I didn't do a lot of that planning. And the amount of planning that they all go through. Now, we went through it initially in Navy training, but I would have to say my son has had to dig in and learn, you know, the nav log system. And I think Trimby probably teaches a lot of the stuff that now that I'm stepping into general aviation, I'm having to dust off my brain or learn for the first time. So there's some great just knowledge of how our, for instance, how our airports and systems work that the GA side of the house brings to aviation that the military side of the house has to learn. And I remember when I first started with Southwest, and just the different markings for the taxiways and runways, those aren't at every military installation. So it was nice to have a GA pilot that understood all those.
It's fascinating what we can learn from each other. I love the working together that we can achieve. Regarding young girls and teenagers who are interested in becoming a part of the aviation community, what would you advise for them, both starting out and leading into their collegiate and future careers?
There's, you know, I think it's so interesting that the things that we're drawn to, whether for young ladies, whether it's dance, music, drama, it doesn't have to be a STEM, particularly exercise or extracurricular, that really contributes to making you a good pilot. And so do the things you're drawn to. Don't feel like you have to get plugged into only aviation events or only aviation related extracurricular. Of course, if they're available, I would recommend it. But if you like sports, if you like archery, if you like anything that requires discipline, is part of training to be a pilot. Anything that requires problem solving, I highly recommend you get a job if you're of age. That brings with it the pressures of getting to work on time. That brings with it the pressures of problem solving and having somebody to answer to for that, beyond your parents who love you and are usually very forgiving. So those things in life, they keep you from being this monolithic person that only has ever sought aviation. And there's nothing wrong with being an aviation nut, but when you're aiming to become a pilot, there's more to it than reading charts and hand-eye coordination.
Excellent. At the end of your book, Nerves of Steel, you mentioned 3 main takeaways. One of these points talks specifically about habits and how those habits shape our responses in life. Can you speak a little bit more to both the development of the habits and how you recommend using carrots to support the growth of these habits?
Sure. Sure. And one of the things that I would preface carrots with is we really rarely have control of our day, the whole day. But one of the things that we tend to have control over is the bookends of our day. So how you start your day and how you end your day. Those are the things that we actually have a little control over. What happens in between, sometimes we plan, but it doesn't happen. So if you're looking for a starting off point to say, you know what, I do want to create a different habit or a new habit here or there, check your bookends, because that's where we do have some control. Set your alarm a little earlier, in both cases, maybe, a little earlier in the morning so that you get to either read some things or go calmly through your emails or whatever you need to do to set your feet solid to start the day. And then at the end of the day, one of the things I found myself dreading was clearing emails at the end of the day. And I realized I keep putting off bedtime because I'm not ready to face my emails yet and get into that. And I realized then they need to go somewhere different in the day. And I put at the end of the day is a carrot of a good book, something that I want to read. And that gets me to bed earlier and a little more sleep. But so bookends, I would say, are where we have the control a little bit better in our day. Great time to set habits. And carrots, it may seem small to you, but when I get ready for a check ride, I take them really seriously. And so I start a couple of months ahead of time and I look at what I have to do. I divide it all up so that I have however many swaths of studying until I get ready to go. But when I get ready to study up here in my loft, it's an upstairs porch that we glassed in. I go outside even in my yard and find some flowers. They may be weeds, but they're a flower. And for some reason that and some good music kind of sets me in the mood of, all right, let's do this. Let's tackle it. And I start going through systems that I need to learn to maybe memorize the diagram, whether loosely or in detail. And so it may be a pot of tea for you. It may be a Snickers bar at the end of your study time or whatever you're facing that you're not really looking forward to. But you can find those carrots in life and find out what works for you and pulls you to that task. And it just makes the day better. I think Mary Poppins said it well, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down.
Yes, I love that. I love the points you've made today. And I've noticed that there's a recurring theme of dedication and reward and how that creates an end goal come to fruition beautifully. So some rapid fire questions to end. Cat or dog?
Dog.
New York City or Backstreet Boys?
Oh my goodness. Can I go for Rat Pack instead?
Yes.
They're older than me, but I always liked their music.
I love that. Beach or mountains?
Mountains.
Low wing or high wing airplanes?
Oh. Okay, I like to take pictures out of high wing, but I'd have to say low wing. I like flying low wing.
Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Must have item on an overnight?
Tea.
Must have item on an overnight?
Tea. I mean, really, it is. My family laughs because when we get ready to go someplace, they know we're not leaving without at least some sweetener and tea in the pack.
I love that. That's awesome. Favorite color?
Lavender.
Oh, very nice. Bucket list international city to visit?
I think Strasbourg, Austria, really anywhere in Austria. And I'm not sure why, just the pictures probably have drawn me.
It's the mountains.
I think you're right. And I got to, the only place in Europe I've ever been is Switzerland. And it was enchantingly beautiful. So anyway, that's kind of one of my hit lists. Or Sweden.
Ooh, Sweden. I've heard they have good chocolate.
Well, and they're actually translating my book into Swedish. So hopefully I'll get to go.
So it's a win-win. I see.
Yes.
Pen or pencil?
A pen.
Yeah. Flip-flops or heels?
Heels.
Oh. If you could pick a superpower, what would it be?
Oh, you know, I don't even know if it's a legitimate superpower, but I would love to know. No, I was going to say I'd love to know what people are thinking, and then I thought, no, I really don't. My childhood superpower that I always dreamed of is the only one I can think of right now, and that is to be able to talk to the animals and understand the animals. I know that it might not work well in today's world. Marvel characters never have that superpower, so.
Well, I mean, some of them do, but if you weren't a professional pilot, what would you be?
You know, I kind of stump on this one. I think I would probably be working in the agricultural community if I didn't go back to get my veterinary science degree. So probably a vet if I weren't a pilot.
Okay. That goes along with your superpower. I love it. What is your favorite class Bravo?
Hands down, Washington, D.C. If Reagan International is landing south, you get to do this river visual that takes you over the Hudson and it's the Hudson. It takes you over the river right in between the mall and the Pentagon, and then you have to be flaps 40 to get down and turn to land. But it's like this 10-second tour of history, and I've always enjoyed history, and just reading about it and never seeing a museum until I went to Washington, D.C. in high school, in a junior in high school. It still makes my heart stir to see the monuments and to see the things that this country, this experiment in democracy, which has never been done before in the world nor since, has done. And the difference that Americans can and should and do make in the world. And so I just have a little stirring moment every time I fly the river visual into Reagan.
That's awesome. I love DC as well. What is your favorite international airport?
You know, I would probably have to say Liberia, Costa Rica. I don't go to a lot of far-flung international airports yet, but that one, I think part of it is just the draw of the overnight. We have such a great place that we stay in Liberia as Southwest pilots, and it's done in a way that everybody hangs out together. It's completely isolated. There's nothing else around, so everybody either goes to the beach or goes to the pool together. Then we always meet for dinner together, then we meet for breakfast. And in the city where everybody can go different directions, everybody kind of figures out what they want to do and they're on their own. But there, the whole thing, it's beautiful jungle mountains going in. It's gorgeous scenery, 360 degrees. And then we land and have an overnight where we kind of have to function as a family a little bit. You know, it's just fun.
Oh, that's awesome and sounds wildly entertaining. I'd like to open it up to the Q&A now. If there's anyone who has a question for Miss Tammie, Captain Tammie, please share. Wave at me if you have your camera on. Anybody? Bueller, going once.
That's one of our family's favorite movies.
Well, it's a good one. So, Miss Trimby, do you have one you'd like to share?
Well, I just want to say I also love Liberia, Costa Rica. So beautiful. And I've been to Sweden a few times, and it's definitely worth the visit.
Oh, I'm just hoping they want to have a book opening or whatever. So I'm excited to go over there and visit.
So I have a guest on here who's military. Sam, if you have a question, do you have a question, Sam, for Tammie Jo coming from the military side? I'm going to unmute you. See if he says anything. No?
Not really, but yeah, I would like to go for some aerobatic after this.
So Sam, what are you flying now?
I'm still on the Cessna 172s, so.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. You know, it's kind of interesting. After my son, he just was solo qualified. He hadn't done his cross country or anything quite yet. And I went up with him in the pattern, and I was right seat, he was left seat, and he did some touch and goes, and he did a great job. And then I said, all right, let me try from the right seat, and went around, and I overshot like crazy because I hadn't noticed how much he had been correcting his pattern around there. And so it made me realize it doesn't even matter what aircraft you're flying. It's gravity and lift that you're dealing with. And those are objective, no matter whether you have a jet engine, you're transonic, or you're Cessna sonic. You are learning the principles that you can fly anything. So good on you, and I'm excited for you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I had a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I recently started my airline career last November, and I found myself the last few months not flying very often. There's been about a month and a half between my flights this summer since I started. Do you have any advice on staying proficient when you go that long between flying?
You are talking to the woman who has done it so many times. I don't know if I just have bad luck sometimes, but I've had to come back from breaking my foot, from having an appendicitis that wound up, I had to have lung surgery because of stuff. Anyway, so I feel like I'm always the comeback kid. And yes, this is what I've found. If you will go ahead and put yourself on just a flashcard rotation or however you like to study, but spend about whatever time. I like to spend about an hour every other day, or pick 4 hours a week, put them wherever you want, reviewing your aircraft manuals, run through your checklists out loud. And I didn't necessarily chair fly, but one of the captains that I flew with, he had the best advice, and I've used it for 26 years. And he said, you don't need to memorize what you need to do. You know, like for a go around thrust, flaps 15, landing gear up, set miss approach, altitude. Don't memorize those things. Memorize the song. Memorize what you need to say, because if you say it, you'll do it. And so I would go through, I'd put little notes, musical notes by the things that I needed to say in procedures. And that way I verbalized them. And so I never forget what order I should put them in, because they're in a little sing-song, really the exact quote that the company asks us to say. But if you'll just keep your brain kind of rolling through aviation terms and your systems and stuff, for one thing, it takes away the anxiety of, oh my gosh, I have not pre-flighted or done my flow, or the sequence of when I take off, is it landing gear up, heading select, or heading select, landing gear up. Those things really, it takes away your anxiety, which opens up your mind. But just keep rumbling through your aviation things while you're off. Set a goal of how much you want to do. If it doesn't help, add a little more. Do different things.
That's great advice. Thank you. Yeah, when I got called last weekend, I got a little nervous. I was like, oh, it's been a long time, but yeah, that's
right.
Really
Oh, yes. And coming back from having 2 kids, our second, I took 10 months off. Part of that was pregnancy. Part of that was just being Marshall's mom. And I swore, okay, I'm not doing that again. And it hurt my brain to come back. But then I realized I can also help myself by keeping, quote, in the books as you're waiting.
Anybody else? Bueller? Maybe.
Megan Carlson, do you have a question? I'm going to unmute you, Megan, because I know that you might have a question. Go ahead. I don't know. Maybe not. Okay. So we do have some gals on here who are quite young, like Megan.
Okay. Megan, how old are you? I don't have you on my screen.
I just turned 18 years old.
All right. See, I was thinking 8. She was talking to somebody really young. You're a young lady.
Yeah, my daughter's 8. My daughter's 8, but she left the house. But she'll be back at 1. She's going to watch the video, but she would love to talk to you. But Megan, let's see what you got for her.
I haven't really.
Well, let me ask you a question, Megan.
Okay.
So, where are you in your flying?
I have my check ride scheduled for next month.
Very good. For your private?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent.
That's a good question. Do you have any advice for somebody going into their first check ride, super anxious about it, and any tips or advice you have to give?
One of the things that I did for my check rides is I needed to get rid of the jitters, and push-ups and jumping jacks are part of my routine in my room, even now, before I go do check rides. But if you've been studying, you need to relax a little bit and realize that you don't, I'm sure your instructor has told you, you don't need to know everything. You need to know where to go to find it. The things that you would need rapid fire in the cockpit, sure, memorize those. And I'm a flashcard junkie. I still, if there's something that I just can't seem to get stuck in my brain, I put it on a flashcard, take it for a walk, repeat it while I'm exercising on the treadmill or on a walk, and it seems to grab hold. But don't hope that you do well. Prepare and know that you're going to do well. I'm certainly not of the philosophy that if you imagine it, it's yours. I think that's a little bit science fiction, really. But hard work pays off, and it also will calm you as you get ready to go. I know Marshall, our son, I was trying to think, there's different inspectors that have different, profiles that people talk about. And so, there was the fear of this one or that one. And I know I've had some with both. And if you just know your stuff and stand on your own 2 feet, and also be willing to learn. In check rides, we learn a lot because our radar is at high warble, and so anything that's said, we tend to remember. So if there's something that you feel like you're rough at, work on it. Get with your instructor. But I would say, if you've prepared for every lesson along the way, then review, and you're good.
Thank you so much. That's great advice.
Sure, and it's healthy, I think, to be a little bit anxious. Now, I'm not talking about anxiety, which is a studied contemplation of fear. That won't help you. But it prompts us to dig a little deeper, spend a little more time. So let that anxiousness just prompt you into making sure your ducks in a row, so to speak, and don't worry about being a little anxious. I mean, everybody's anxious about a concert or a game, or, you know, that's part of life. That's how we're built to, I think, get a little bit of that adrenaline working for you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you
Sure.
very much.
And good luck.
Thank you.
I have another question. So as your experience with a captain, what do you think makes a good first officer? So like, what can a first officer do to make the flight deck a better experience or be helpful?
Right. It's funny. I've been a captain for about 20 years, and I was just thinking, I am going to write my son, who is going to be a pilot one way or the other someday, and about being a captain. And it's been long enough that as a first officer, one of the things I remember that my captain said to me that I thought, you know what? I can interpret that 100 different ways. And his comment was, because I'd set up his altimeter, which I'm not required to do, his 2 altimeters, and his side is heading and his course, or the heading, which is central, and his course outbound as well for the departure that we were going to do. And when he sat down and we went through the checklist and he didn't have to do those things, he goes, thank you. You know, a good first officer makes their captain look good. And I thought, maybe I hadn't really thought about that, or makes my job easier. And so I started looking at not how to take over the cockpit, because anybody who's been a captain knows how that can really get the whole sequence of the captain, who's ultimately responsible, needs to set the pace for the checklist. It's not how fast you can answer that I want. It's how, you know, I need to set the pace so that I get a chance to look at things, not just say the answer. And when every once in a while I'll have first officers who've flown with people that are grooming them to, you know, keep it snappy. And I'll say, you know, let me set the pace because I've got to check everything. And so as a first officer, make sure that you follow the pace of the captain. And if they're going too fast, you will help them by taking the time to, when you reply, you look at that switch, that knob, that lever. They may feel like you're dragging them, but you're a parachute. You're helping them. And so anything that you can do, quite frankly, even down to when you get out of the cockpit and say, hey, can I get you a cup of coffee? I think there's a real tendency right now, as women, we don't want to be perceived as helpers or secondary or whatever in any kind. And I think that's silly. I think good manners are good manners. And so if you can exude good manners, which might include getting your crew coffee on a first officer paycheck, I wouldn't think that would work often, but make yourself available. For me, crossing seatbelts in the back, helping the flight attendants pick up trash, is how I met a lot of the flight attendants that I know today and made friends. And also you get to see a little bit more when you're more involved. The shift right now at Southwest has been that the captain's really the only one that has the time to do that. First officers are setting up the next, loading the next flight plan, the weather, all this. So you'll have to pick and choose from your cockpit what works, but simple things like setting in the altimeter setting, and it was like huge. And I see it now when I fly with somebody who sets up the altimeter setting while I'm out dealing with stuff. I'm thinking, it's not about him, it's about us or her. I don't get to fly with many girls. Come on and get out here. But that's what I would say.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Captain, I have a question for you.
Sure.
This is Gina, and my background is all aircraft maintenance, so I definitely am different because they don't fit the model, right? People have no idea. They think of a pilot, but no, aircraft mechanic or technician. So for those that are listening, or for us to pass on to younger women who might be stepping into a non-traditional, and still after all these years, I'll use it, non-traditional job
Right.
set. Because you've been there and you
Right.
still are there, like you said, you don't fly with that many women. What bit of advice, whether it's aircraft maintenance or piloting, might you give a young lady who might be a little shy about that?
Right. First of all, I just want to say, go Gina. That field has less women in it than my field. And I do think we kind of flavor the soup. I do think we add to it. And so one of the things I would tell the young women looking at doing this, or already in it and feeling a little bit of a rebuff or just not included in things. First of all, what's your motive for being there? You know, and then what is your merit for being there? Do you have the skills? Is it a dream that your parents had for you? Is it a dream that you had just to show them that you could, but you really don't have the skill set? And not that you don't have the skill set to do something even better, even more challenging, but that's just, this isn't it. And I would say, you know, if I tried to step into your shoes, Gina, I would be a fish out of water. I don't have that skill set. I admire it. I just don't have it. And so, you know, looking at what is my motive and what is my merit. If I know some of you may have read in my book, but I talk about, you know, I really wanted to be a racehorse jockey. That was my childhood dream. And my mom was kind enough to just tell me, it won't work. You're 5'7" in 7th grade and growing. You could give the jockey a leg up on the horse, but you're not going to ride it. And so being honest with ourselves, it cuts it. You know, thank goodness she was honest with me. And I realized, you know, she's got some truth there that I need to listen to. So I didn't waste my time on it. I can enjoy riding horses, but I won't race them. And so I headed out into another direction. So young ladies that are looking at it, certainly, if you're interested in it, try it. But if it's not something that is really you're motivated personally by, and you don't have the merit, the skills, that doesn't mean you can't acquire them. If you just don't have the tools, get the tools. But if you don't have the skill set, find something that you're going to enjoy, that you're good at.
Thank you very much. I left the part about if you don't have the tools, go get them.
Yes, those are acquirable.
So since we're the Mile High chapter, do you ski, Tammie Jo, or snowboard or sled? What's your favorite mountain activity? Snowshoeing?
I love downhill skiing. Growing up in Tularosa, I went to school with the Mescalero Apaches, and they own the mountain there. It was called Sierra Blanca when I grew up. It's called Ski Apache now. So for $5, if you join Ski Club, you could get out of school with an excused pass in the middle of the week and a bus ride up, and skis, poles, lessons, boots for $5. And so I love skiing. And luckily I married a man who thought it was just as wonderful. And so he thought it was important that we take our kids, and yes, I would say that's probably my favorite mountain wintertime sport is skiing. I haven't tried snowboarding, so I will say at this point, I'm probably going to stick with skiing.
Have you skied in Colorado? Do you have a favorite place in Colorado?
Yes. And I would have to say Durango is probably my favorite, mainly because that's where I get to go. My folks live in Aztec, New Mexico now, which is just across the border, just south of the Colorado border. So when we have a chance to go see them and get a little Durango skiing in, why, that's it. Our son, though, is going to Colorado Springs to what I call a little school there at Colorado Springs, the Air Force Academy. And he bought himself a ski pass. So I hope to see him up there and go skiing together.
Wonderful.
Have
So
you
do
ever
What's yours? You're the native. I need to find out, what is your favorite Colorado spot?
I like Monarch. I like that up there. It's usually less crowded, but they still have some challenging slopes. So
Okay.
that's quite entertaining. But actually, I wondered if you've ever seen the Thunderbirds fly.
Long ago, and honestly, from my ranch, from my family's ranch, when they performed at Holloman Air Force Base, I haven't seen them since then.
Oh, you looking forward to graduation then?
Yes, although, you know, I never wish away time. We've had Marshall home for 4 months now. I kind of tease him about doing Air Force Academy homeschool style at the kitchen table, but I've so enjoyed having him home. But yes, I think the graduation, even though Dean and I are Navy pilots, we're going to go wearing Air Force gala.
Oh, okay. That's My dad was 30 years in the Navy, and so when we go to the game, we're like some of the 10 people there that are in our Navy gear.
Right. We wore Air Force, but yelled for Navy. We yelled for the Air Force too.
Just not quite as loudly, right?
Exactly. There's some things that not everyone needs to know.
I have a great question, and Melinda, you might want to help me with this question, or Melinda, I'm going to actually unmute you so you can help me with this question. I'm going to unmute you here. So Melinda's also in the filming industry, and we were talking this morning, actually, before this call, about what's happening with COVID and aviation, and will there ever be a movie about this happening, and will it be specific to aviation with COVID? And
Right.
Or on note 2, how about a movie based on your experiences, Tammie Jo? And Melinda, would you like to ask kind of a little bit more of since you're the movie expert, from your perspective?
Definitely not an expert. I'm not a big movie watcher because I don't have the patience for it. And so they need to be captivating. So I'm in the independent industry with shorter films, shorts, documentaries, less Hollywood budget. Let's get to the point. And so we were talking about the boys, Truby's sons, and they're interested in film, and I've been mentoring them. And then I was also mentoring a capstone student here who wants to be an airport manager. He flew once and he didn't feel great about it, but he wants to run an airport. And his internship was cut short and he was bummed about the whole thing. And what can he do? So he shot his capstone. And I said, there is so much going on that needs to be documented and reported on and explored and questions asked. And now that we're a little bit further down the road and we see that lockdown wasn't an isolated thing, it's carried on longer. How are we going to keep moving forward? And it's really the stories of how this industry that was in a desperate need for pilots suddenly has people furloughed. And in one day, it was like March 13th was really the day for me where the world shifted and we just went, oh God, something's about to happen here.
Right.
And so how are they repurposing? What are they doing with their time? What are they exploring? How are they bettering themselves, but also how are they coping? And then how is the world going to change? I thought I'd see a pretty fast shift over to corporate aircraft. That the executives that I work with in my corporate job would be interested in private flights to go ahead and get where they need to be. And everybody accepted being grounded much better than I thought they would. And they've now kind of come into this mindset that we're not going to ever travel the same again. And that's shocking, disturbing. My question to you is like your bucket list when you're retired, what kind of planes do you want to fly and where do you want to go? And have you landed at the Telluride airport? And because so much fun. And the other fun one is Los Alamos. You feel like you're landing on an aircraft carrier at that one. And as a civilian, that's as close as I'll ever get to that.
Yes.
So Los Alamos, I recommend Los Alamos, Telluride, of course, Leadville, just to get your certificate and your glass that you landed there. But the interesting thing that's going to happen is the documentaries about overcoming, how are we adapting, and how is this whole industry going to adapt to a new normal that seems to be, it's going to be with us at least a year from now. We'll be maybe emerging from it, but my corporation we're not back in an office until end of January 2021. And this is a Fortune 500 high-tech company. And so the acceptance of this shift is what's been so interesting to me, because I keep thinking it'll be over, we'll go back. And it's not working out that way. So really, you're going to be retiring, bless your heart. I hate to hear that, because we don't want somebody like you not out there. But at the same time, you're going to be watching all this happen. You're going to see your son go through it. And that's really fodder for stories, documentaries, and deep dives into industries in the corporate aircraft industry, and even private commercial little charters and things like that. Will they maybe, there's been a lot of education lately on that. Where's this all going to go? And how do you hold that hope?
Yeah. For one thing, Telluride we had planned to go into, but COVID happened. We now call it BOC because of COVID. We did this, we didn't do this, BOC. And but like retiring, I'm really just retiring from my paying job. Okay. And I have a couple of museums that I work with, as well as a few boards, one of which is the new Department of Transportation Board, Women in Aviation Advisory Board. And so there's lots of things to be done. I will say, and quite frankly, my own little group here, there's an orphanage school in our town that it's kids taken out of harsh and neglective homes and abusive homes, and put into these cabins that similar age kids, boys in one cabin, girls in another, and they even devised a charter school for them because they weren't able to fit in with these other kids that have stable homes. Their life was so different. And so I wound up plugging in there 4 years ago, and we have basically, I call it tea with life lessons. And I've grabbed a few more volunteers that understand kids that don't maybe react to things the same that are quote unquote normal kids do. And so I think there's some really exciting opportunities. I think COVID has definitely, Melinda, made us shift. And in aviation, it may be that we have to shift into a different avenue. I think about corporate and commercial flying has shrunk, no question. But Mission Aviation Fellowship, Samaritan's Purse flying, there's organizations that are not affiliated with a religion or a faith that fly. There's still a call for aviators, but we are going to have to shift. And I think this is a great opportunity to look around and see how we can keep these two different worlds from diverging, because we have schools that have shut down or not reopening, and it's early education, not college education, that brings together the gap of the haves and the have-nots. If you don't have early education, then a college education paid for means nothing. I look at the kids that I went to school with, the Mescalero Apache kids during my time that started in junior high. And bottom line is, not one of them one in 8 years took advantage of the free education. The kids that I work with, the state has provided a complete education for them, college education paid for. but they don't have the early education to spring from it, that foundation that you spring from. So while it may mean our occupation, our profession is stymied or stumped a bit, there may be things that instead of being such a driven in one direction society, we branch out. We start looking at what does our neighbor need? What does this little school need? What does, and do more than one thing. I was reading a book recently called The Great Influenza. It was longer than what I normally read books. I think it was, 700 or 800 pages. And it went into the details of how the 1918 influenza that struck the world, it was more contagious and deadly, not just contagious. COVID is very contagious. It's not more deadly than the 1918 flu. And it hit young people, 20, 30-year-olds. The healthier you were, the more mortal it was. And how did we get from that to the roaring 20s a few years later? And part of it was because we were not in such a grooved mentality of, I do this, and this is what I do, and this is all I do. I'm really good at this, so this is what I do. We were an agricultural nation still, so people still had to get up and feed and milk and bring in things from the field. So I think COVID may make us dig a little deeper and spread out and look around and go, I could grow my own herbs, or just little things that make us realize, okay, we could branch out. We don't have to be really good at just one thing. Sometimes being a jack of all trades has its perks.
I love that
I
answer.
have to agree with that because I do a lot of different things. So the main thing is, I think one of the questions we all had was, are they going to make a film about the crisis that you flew through? I'm sure you've been approached. Are they going to?
Yes. Actually, it's not going to be a film about Flight 1380. It'll probably follow the story arc of the book, which is, there'll be an opening of a moment during the flight. And then it'll go to backstory. And it'll be more about, like you said, one of you said earlier, not about just that flash reaction at that time, but how do you get to that point where you have that foundation of thought process and ability to deal with things in a moment's notice, but with some problem-solving priorities constantly rotating to fit the situation. So the Flight 1380 will certainly be in it, but it won't be the main. The flight time won't be all Flight 1380.
Mm-hmm. Good. Thank you.
Sure.
We have reached the end of our time. Captain Tammie Jo, thank you so much for your time today. It has been a real pleasure working with you and your team over the last few months to set this up for our little chapter.
Sarah, you were wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing your experience to our chapter and speaking into a challenging time that we are currently in. So on behalf of our chapter, I just want to thank you so much, and that's the end of the meeting. So thank you everyone for attending.
Well, it was wonderful meeting all of you. Zoom-wise.
Thank you.
Honored to meet you.
Nice to meet
Bye.
you, Tammie Jo.
Bye, Tammie Jo.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.